Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cipher Brief. I'm writer Ethan Masukul. Today, we're going to be talking about the Guam defense system. The U.S. military and the Missile Defense Agency are touting a new air and missile defense system for the island. It has several components, including an Aegis system. And to discuss the system with me today is retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He has been critical of the new missile defenses, calling it quote, the worst possible solution at an event last year. Mark, thank you very much for joining us again.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Ethan. Always great to be on the Cipher Brief.
Thank you. So, just to start the conversation, just for a level set, what is the importance of Guam? Why does it matter?
Guam is a strategic, location for the U.S. military in terms of its ability to operationally project forces throughout the Western Pacific. And what I mean by that is it is the edge of the second island chain.
Right.
You think of the first island chain, and then the second island chain as distances away from China into the Western Pacific. So Guam's on the edge of the second island chain. So we've put a lot of investment in there. We have a submarine base there with anywhere from 4 to 6 permanently home ported submarines there, and a maintenance facility and weapons reload facility. So very critical for the Navy. The Air Force has Anderson Air Force Base, which has an enormous airfield, bomber capable. It can host multiple squadrons of fighters, bombers, refuelers. It's where we're going to eventually reassert air control into the Western Pacific in a conflict with China, if that were to occur. Also has big stowage facilities. So again, a critical spot. And then third, in what in hindsight now is probably not a great move, we've moved some of the Marine Corps Expeditionary Forces. We're going to move them from Okinawa to Guam. Now, this was done politically, more than a decade ago, as a decision to reduce the pressure of forward stationing and forward deploying U.S. Marines in Okinawa, which was a politically challenging thing. The Japanese paid a lot for the development of Guam. Billions of dollars of Japanese money went into building these. So even though we may not want to do it today, it's probably something that's going to happen. So in summary, you have critical Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps forces forward postured in Guam. And just add one more thing, it's highly likely that were we to command and control some kind of conflict in the Western Pacific, Indo-PACOM would probably need to come forward from Hawaii, and Guam is certainly one of the most likely locations for that. So strategically, operationally, even tactically, a very meaningful location for U.S. forces.
Right. So, Guam, very important, which means it needs a strong, capable defense system, which is what the military says they are building right now. It is a distributed network to counter medium and intermediate range ballistic missile threats, according to the Pentagon. And there's lots of components to it. Like I mentioned, an Aegis system, a THAAD defense battery, different kinds of radars. So, Mark, you know the specifics better than I do. Can you go through the components of this defense system and your issues with them?
Sure. So first, I'm going to try to help the Department of Defense define what they're doing here, since they're a little incomplete. It needs to be defended against all threats, and those threats include intermediate range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, hypersonic maneuvering missiles. That can be launched from ships, submarines, aircraft, and even ground launched from China. That's a pretty extensive battery of incoming things. They can be at a very high altitude, at a low altitude. They can be on a straight flight, on a maneuvering flight. They can come. The vast majority will come directly from China, but some could maneuver around the backside of Guam. So you're going to need a very capable, high capacity integrated air missile defense system to protect Guam from this litany of forces. And I'm not even counting the very limited issue we have with defeating intermediate range ballistic missiles from Korea, which was the traditional Defense of Guam mission before 2020, and for which we had put the THAAD, or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD, on Guam, almost 12 years, now 15 years ago.
Mhm.
Okay, so circling back, you need this. Now, you described a bunch of things that have been talked about and have been thought about. And what I'm going to gently say that the last 4 years has been a cluster F. The Biden administration took the exact wrong approach to defending Guam. And with a few minor exceptions, Guam is no safer today than it was 4 years ago. But we have spent a lot of money and wasted critical time. Instead of anchoring the defense in an Aegis-based system, truly anchoring it in something called Aegis Ashore, it's something we've put in Poland and Romania for ballistic missile defense from Iran. But we all know Aegis has cruise. Every weapon, every threat I mentioned, Aegis handles. Near-range ballistic missiles, short range, which we didn't mention because they're not involved in this, it handles. Cruise missiles, handles. High-speed maneuvering cruise missiles that come around the backside, it handles. Hypersonics, it handles. It handles it. It was the obvious solution. Now, why did they do it? First bit of intransigence was the Navy saying, we don't want to do it. Look grumpy. We don't like this doing stuff ashore stuff. Despite the fact that at any one time, 70% of the Navy is assigned ashore duty and 85% of the Navy is actually physically ashore. We don't want these 60 people, which is what it would have been in an Aegis ashore. And by the way, Mark, they would tell me, and this is the head of our Navy, saying, oh, Mark, you don't get it. Sailors don't like these assignments. I get it that sailors don't like to be stationed in the middle of nowhere, Romania. Guam is different. There are tons of Aegis sailors in Guam married to Japanese nationals who would like nothing more than shore duty in Guam. Okay, so the Navy took a pass. So here's the Navy. The Navy wants nothing to do with it. And of course, the other problem is the Army wants everything to do with it. So the Army's like launching all kinds of ideas. They're using their officers at JIAMDO, the Joint Integrated Air Missile Defense Organization, inside the Joint Staff. And they convince CAPE, the Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation Office at the Department of Defense, to ignore the actual professionals at the Missile Defense Agency saying, hey, we probably need Aegis ashore here, and went with their own system. A new idea, an idea anchored in how the Army fights, which is fantastic, except the kick-ass missile defense service is known as the Navy, that actually has things ready to go right now for these threats. The Army is not. And look, the Army does a few things well in missile defense, but let's be clear, missile defense is not the primary focus of the Army. It is, I won't call it a backwater, but it's a rear water. In the Navy, integrated air missile defense is the sine qua non. We have to have it. So, okay. So they came up with this idea of a dispersed missile defense. And I'm just going to say, they said, we got to disperse because the Chinese are going to attack Guam and take this system out. And I'm like, just so we understand each other, Guam's not big. I mean, it's not going to fall over into the ocean like that congressman said years ago, but it's not big. And we built a dispersed missile defense architecture relying on untested and unintegrated efforts. And this has led to the squandering of the 3.5 years of effort. And then the other crazy thing is when the Army decides to do something, they just have a different, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they have a different concept. We tend to make things compact and low personnel manning because ships are like that. So our idea of an Aegis ashore with 60 or 80 people versus their idea with distributed 4 or 5 radar panels, distributed trucks driving missiles around, distributed C2, you end up with literally 1,000 people. And then you have to have military construction and a commissary and an elementary school and all these other things because you're bringing in a ton of Army personnel to do this. And the final thing I'll mention is that in the end, the whole idea that we would disperse ourselves so that we couldn't do it, there still was only one C2 node. So when the Chinese figured out what that was, and if they were fortunate enough to hit it, you still had a single point of failure. So I'll just gently say, we didn't achieve the dispersal. We did achieve not getting it done. And we spent a bit of dough. And then we did a test recently, but many of the things involved in the test are leaving the island. So I'll just say this was abject failure.
Recognizing excellence in national security, the Cipher Brief Honors Dinner celebrates those who've made a real difference in protecting our nation. It's an unforgettable evening with top leaders in the field. Join us in honoring these remarkable contributions. Reserve your seat now at cipherbriefhonors.com.
You raised a couple of things that I want to pick up on. So first, the disconnect between making it a dispersed defense system, and then, as you mentioned, Guam is not small. Is the size of the territory that you're trying to defend, did that play a role in what you call this?
No, the Aegis Ashore could have covered. Now, look, do I think you need to have point defense weapon systems spread out, at the submarine base, at the air base? You bet.
Mhm.
But the command and control, the big radar that could have controlled this, could have been in one Aegis Ashore site, probably somewhere near Anderson, the air base. Look, I didn't do the environmental studies. I haven't participated in a siting thing. Of course, I'm not sure how far MDA, Missile Defense Agency, got down that before they were outmaneuvered by the rest of OSD.
Mhm.
It's easy to blame MDA because they have the name Missile Defense Agency. But in this case, I think that's unfair. I think a large part of the blame for this belongs in other OSD and joint staff entities. And I don't even blame the services. Look, I blame the Navy for saying no. But I get it. The Army's told, here's a mission. The Army's mission focused. They went out and tried to do it. I'm just saying Guam is not a maneuver space, right? I mean, I would just gently say Poland's a maneuver space, Guam's a little smaller. So I think that's how we got in this jam.
And then moving forward, how would you recommend we get out of this jam? Or are we too far down the hole?
No, I don't think we should. Look, did we lose? We're not going to, like Superman, reverse time, spin the Earth backwards. So we've lost 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
No time machine here. However, we can be smart going forward. First of all, put the professionals in charge, the Missile Defense Agency. Tell them what you need. Even if it includes, you have to say the word cruise missile defense, which is not something they normally do. So you need to come up with a defense architecture for the cruise, hypersonic, and ballistic missile defense of Guam. What systems would you want? I think what they would say is an Aegis Ashore, the THAAD system that's already there, some good Army air defense systems. Initially, Patriot and NASAMS, which is a Norwegian U.S. system, has done. Both of those have performed well in combat in Ukraine. And then over time, there's a replacement Army system called IFPC. I usually call it the Phoenix Suns of missile defense. It's always 2 years away from being 2 years away, but eventually we are going to be just 2 years away, and that might be today. Well, actually, it's 3 years now, but maybe 2 or 3 years now that IFPC can come in. So bottom line is, use systems we know work, Aegis, THAAD, Patriot, integrate them with initially Link 16, which is a known joint interoperable link system. Over time, if you want to bring in a different Army system, that's great. But again, over time, and then bring in these other Army systems as they come to fruition. We can have something up and running reasonably in 2027, 2028.
2027, 2028. If we start now.
If we start now, we're not going to start now. So 2028, 2029.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see when we do start taking in those changes that you recommend. Mark Montgomery, you've written a lot about this. You've spoken a lot about this. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights.
Thank you.